You might have learned about the Crusades in school, but what do most people actually know about the Crusades? In this series, we will explore the origins of the Crusades, the reasons why they happened, and what their impact was on the world. Part 1, Deus Vult. The word crusade comes from the Latin word crux, which means cross. It was originally used to describe any kind of holy mission, but it eventually came to be associated with the violent conquest of the Holy Land by European Christians. Although there were earlier conflicts between European Christians and Muslims, the Crusades are generally considered to have started in 1095 when Pope Urban VII announced the First Crusade during the Council of Clermont. There is some debate over why Urban called for this crusade. Some historians argue that he wanted to distract European Christians from the Italian mainland, where there had been multiple rebellions against papal authority. Others say he wanted to divert the attention of French nobles away from the costly and increasingly unpopular war in southern France against the Berbers. But the main reason for starting the First Crusade was the Byzantine Empire's request for military assistance against the expanding Seljuk Turks. This request was prompted by the Battle of Manzikert in 1071, where the Byzantines lost much of their Anatolian territory to the Turks. Following Urban's speech at Clermont, European nobles began to prepare for a campaign into the Levant. The next year, a large force consisting of French, German, and Italian troops met up near Constantinople. However, they wasted much of their time arguing over who should lead them. Eventually, Godfrey of Bouillon emerged as the most popular candidate, but he refused to accept the title of king because he said he didn't want to be considered superior to other Christian rulers. So instead, he became the first advocate of the Holy Sepulchre. After fighting through Byzantine territory, the Crusader army reached the city of Antioch in 1098, but soon afterwards, the Muslim ruler of Damascus sent out an army to stop them from advancing further east. The Crusaders were defeated and forced to retreat back to their base at Antioch. A siege of Antioch began in 1097, but it wasn't until June 3, 1098, that the city fell to the Crusaders. They then marched on to Jerusalem and laid siege to it from July 1098 to July 1099. At first, the Crusaders hadn't intended to conquer the city, but rather to negotiate a peaceful entrance into it. But when those negotiations failed, Pope Urban declared a crusade against the Jews living in the city. That same day, the Crusaders stormed Jerusalem and massacred almost the entire Jewish population, killing around 1,000 men, women, and children. Only those who converted to Christianity or Islam were spared. Then, just days later, the Muslim inhabitants of the city suffered the same fate. After establishing a Crusader state in the Levant, the European kings who had taken part in the First Crusade returned home. Meanwhile, Godfrey of Bouillon died on the Crusaders' behalf in 1100. He was succeeded by his brother Baldwin I, and over the next 2 decades, the Crusader states grew in size and wealth. But in 1118, the Seljuks and other Muslim forces launched a counterattack and recaptured most of the cities the Crusaders had seized. By 1129, only Jerusalem and a few coastal cities remained in Crusader hands. The Second Crusade was called in 1145 after rumors spread across Europe that the Muslim leader Zengi had conquered the city of Edessa in Mesopotamia. Again, it was French and German troops who formed the backbone of the Crusader army, but once again, they failed to achieve their goal of retaking Edessa. When King Louis VII returned to France in 1148, he was forced to abdicate the throne in favor of his son, Louis the Young. As a result, no further major crusades were launched during the 12th century. Instead, European Christians began to focus on building up the Kingdom of Jerusalem, which by 1183 stretched from the Mediterranean Sea to the Arabian Desert. But the reign of King Baldwin IV was coming to an end. He suffered from leprosy and realized that his successor would likely be Saladin, a Kurdish Muslim leader who had risen through the ranks of the Ayyubid dynasty. Saladin's grandfather, Shirkuh, had come to Egypt in 1169 at the request of the vizier to help him put down rebellions. Shirkuh soon replaced the vizier and was appointed as Grand Butler of the Caliphate. When he died in 1174, he was succeeded by his nephew Saladin. In 1174, Saladin led an invasion into the Levant and conquered the Crusader city of Ascalon. After seizing more territory from the Crusaders, Saladin turned his attention to the Kingdom of Jerusalem and laid siege to the city in 1187. 3 days after the siege began, Crusader King Baldwin IV died of leprosy, and as expected, Saladin offered his rule to Baldwin's successor, the young King Henry II. But Henry refused and asked for help from Europe. This proved to be a fatal mistake. Henry's request sparked the Third Crusade, which was led by King Philip II of France, Holy Roman Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, and the future King Richard the Lionheart. The first two were eager to seize Jerusalem, while Richard hoped to recapture Acre. Along the way, however, Barbarossa drowned in a river while trying to cross it, and Philip soon afterwards returned home. Realizing that he could not win against Saladin, Richard agreed to a truce in 1192, and both sides were allowed to keep the territory they possessed when the truce began. Although Richard did not capture Jerusalem, his reputation as a great warrior lived on in medieval literature. Over the next half-century, European kings would try again and again to conquer the city, but each time they would either lose or be forced to return home due to external problems. For example, King Louis IX invaded in 1228, but he had to return to France in 1229 because of a revolt by his son. 4 years later, Holy Roman Emperor Frederick II seized Jerusalem, but he soon abandoned his claim on it because it was costing too much money to defend. By this point, it was clear that launching massive military campaigns into the Middle East was not going to work. Thus, the focus of the Crusades shifted from the Levant to the Iberian Peninsula. There, a small Christian kingdom known as the County of Barcelona was resisting the Moors. Between 1218 and 1223, Spanish King Alfonso IX took advantage of internal divisions within the Moorish kingdoms and conquered large swaths of southern Spain. However, in 1225, Pope Gregory VIII issued a papal bull calling for a crusade in the Holy Land once more. The King of Aragon ignored this call, but the English king, Henry III, decided to take up arms against the Muslims. His army consisted of 30,000 English, French, and Italian soldiers. But when they arrived in Acre in 1228, they found that it was difficult to wage war in the hot climate of the Middle East. Moreover, Henry III was busy consolidating his power in England and had little interest in campaigning in the Levant. As a result, the Crusader army spent most of their time looting nearby villages. On one occasion, they pillaged the city of Sidon, and when its inhabitants complained to the local Muslim ruler, he retaliated by cutting off the water supply to Acre. Soon afterwards, Henry III and the Muslim leader made a deal to end the siege, and the Crusaders were allowed to leave the city with all of their plunder. Once again, a crusade had ended without accomplishing anything. To prevent such a thing from happening again, Pope Innocent IV decided that the next crusade would be led by a member of the royal family. He chose King Louis IX of France, who assembled a huge army consisting of 40,000 knights and 400,000 infantrymen. The largest force of its kind since the First Crusade, they set off for the Holy Land in 1248. But within weeks of reaching Tunis, the Crusaders were decimated by disease and forced to return home. Although Louis IX did manage to invade again in 1254, he also failed to make any progress against the Muslims. All in all, the Crusades would continue for another 2 centuries. But given that neither Louis nor any of the other European kings had accomplished anything, it's hard to see what they hoped to achieve with their latest attempts. Click here to watch a video on why the Ottoman Empire fell, or click here to watch this other video.